tests in advance of the meeting. For the benefit of the members and the witnesses, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. Before we begin our study, just one quick business note, and that is the clerk has circulated the budget for the study in the amount of $25,250, and I would seek approval by the committee.
Motion to approve.
Thank you very much, Madame Gladue. All in favor? Thank you very much. Approved. Okay, we will now continue. I will introduce our witnesses today. For our first panel, we have Ms. Deborah Lyons, Special Envoy for Preserving Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism. Welcome. From the B'nai B'rith Canada, Richard Robertson, Director, Research and Advocacy. Welcome. Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, Richard Marceau, Vice President, External Affairs and General Counsel. Welcome. From the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Canada, Jamie Kersner Roberts, Senior Director, Policy and Advocacy. And I believe he is appearing. Okay, you are appearing by video conference. So fabulous. Thank you very much. Pour nos témoins avec nous, vous pouvez parler en.
For our witnesses with us, you can speak in French or in English as you see fit.
5 minutes. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will proceed with the rounds of questions. And I will ask Ms. Lyons to please commence her 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for your attention to this important subject. Merci tout le monde pour l'occasion.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to look at one of the most important issues affecting our country.
To share a panel with respected colleagues, it is an honor to work closely with them to fight for a better Canada. As everyone in this room knows, anti-Semitism is a non-partisan issue that impacts all of us, whether Jewish or non-Jewish Canadians. It is well known that anti-Semitism erodes democracy, and as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe has recently concluded, it is a clear threat to national and international security. My mandate, as many of you know, is to combat anti-Semitism and preserve Holocaust remembrance. It is both a domestic and an international mandate. My mandate does not...
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chairperson, I'm sorry, but the interpretation isn't working out of the little boxes there. I don't want to interrupt the witness for no specific reason. What the witness is saying is important, so I'd like everyone to be able to hear the interpretation. It would seem that there is a problem. Yes, we can check right now. Thank you. Please be patient.
Okay. Can you hear me? Is there interpretation? No? Okay, pas encore? Okay. OK, on réessaie. Est-ce que vous pouvez...
We can try again. Could you confirm whether you can hear the interpretation? Good. Excellent.
We will not deduct any of that time, please rest assured. Feel free to continue wherever you feel you need to, if you feel you need to restart, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be best that I restart.
Absolutely, we will restart the clock. And I neglected to say, just so that everybody realizes, because I will raise this when we're at 30 seconds, and then this at time's up. I'll be a little bit lenient if it's a couple of seconds, but otherwise, if I interrupt, don't take it personally. It's sort of the chair's job. So thank you.
All those signals. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. All right, once again, thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for your attention this morning. Merci pour votre...
Thank you for your attention this morning and for the opportunity to discuss an issue which, in my opinion, is one of the most important for our country.
Share a panel with respected colleagues. It is an honor to work closely with them to fight for a better Canada. As everyone in this room knows, anti-Semitism is not and should not be a nonpartisan issue that impacts us all, whether Jewish or non-Jewish Canadians. It is well known that anti-Semitism erodes democracy, and as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, has recently concluded, it is a clear threat to national and international security. My mandate is to combat anti-Semitism and preserve Holocaust remembrance. It is both a domestic and an international mandate. It does not have a geopolitical focus. Madam Chair, there is so much hard work in front of us to be done on a wide range of issues, but we are here today to focus on university campuses. It is there, at our centers of learning, our sources of new knowledge and civil discourse, that I felt the greatest concern as I traveled across Canada. Campuses cannot be considered places of learning or bastions of free expression as long as any student and faculty are not safe. Today, Jewish students and faculty are experiencing targeting, intimidation, and anti-Jewish hate. Jewish students, particularly those who self-identify as Zionists, as I do, are facing a tsunami of anti-Semitism. And here let me quote the Prime Minister's recent remarks. In a country like Canada, it should be and it must be safe to declare oneself a Zionist, Jewish or not. Zionism is not a dirty word or something anyone should be targeted for agreeing with. I have heard from students, faculty, and staff about serious issues as I traveled across Canada, ranging from the glorification of Hamas, a known terrorist group, professors singling out Jewish students in classes and at protest, Jewish students being harassed, to physical threats, chants of all Zionists are racist or perverts. Go back to Europe, and long live October 7th. Outside agitators setting up camp on university property and blocking freedom of movement and ability to learn. Madam Chair, hate speech and workplace harassment are not consistent with free expression nor academic freedom. Worse still is hearing that when these issues are brought to the attention of university administrations, responses are frequently delayed or non-existent. Codes of conduct at most of our universities exist, but are not being implemented. Madam Chair, capitulation to those engaging in hate-filled activities corrodes the very values on which institutions of higher education are built, and where all students must be able to learn without fear. Since October 16th, my office has met with Jewish communities across Canada, with Hillels, with Jewish students, with faculty, university presidents and administrations, and with provincial ministers of advanced education who have direct responsibility for universities. We will continue to work with all partners over the coming summer months to ensure a healthy campus environment for return in September. Based on these meetings, let me close with a few recommendations. Anti-Semitism training. It is badly needed. This training should be tailored to university administrations, legal councils, and yes, most particularly, heads of EDI or DEI offices, security personnel, and student life professionals. Clearly defining anti-Semitism and understanding its many manifestations is crucial in combating it. We must also assist and encourage, second recommendation, post-secondary institutions and the leadership to implement their own policies. What we have seen is a reluctance to implement their own codes of conduct even when they relate to safety issues. The tools exist, and post-secondary institutions have a duty to act. In closing, Madam Chair, when our Jewish citizens are targeted, it threatens the democratic ideals of equality and justice for all Canadians. We pride ourselves on being a diverse and inclusive multicultural society. In this moment, we are being put to the test. It is not an overreach to say our shared humanity is at stake. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Listen, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here on behalf of B'nai B'rith Canada. B'nai B'rith is Canada's oldest human rights organization and the voice of Canada's grassroots Jewish community. Our organization, which was established in 1875, is dedicated to eradicating racism, anti-Semitism, and hatred in all its forms, as well as championing the rights of the marginalized. B'nai B'rith's submission to this honorable committee comes at a time when Canada's Jewish community is in crisis. In 2023, there was an alarming rise in anti-Semitism across Canada. B'nai B'rith's annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents recorded an over 109.1% increase in anti-Semitism in comparison to the previous year. Our audit also noted that campuses across the country are increasingly becoming the setting for anti-Semitic acts. The situation for Jewish Canadian post-secondary students has become untenable. The purpose of B'nai B'rith's submission is to aid the committee in ensuring that its report contains recommendations that can be utilized by the federal government to effectively respond to the pressing needs of the nation's Jewish post-secondary students. It is essential that Canadian leaders work to ensure the continued safety and well-being of Canada's Jewish post-secondary students. For our democracy to continue to thrive, our campuses must remain environments conducive of the academic success of all our nation's students. Members of this esteemed committee have the opportunity to contribute to the fight against anti-Semitism and to preserve the sanctity of Canada's post-secondary campuses by endorsing the following recommendations in their forthcoming report. Our first recommendation is that the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry work with Canada's federal research funding agencies to amend their funding agreements with institutions to include, as a component of the agreements, a provision that all activities funded by the agencies are conducted in consultation with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, as well as its illustrative examples. The federal government adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism in 2019. In 2021, the federal government pledged to continue to enhance the adoption and implementation of IRA's working definition of anti-Semitism, and to encourage mainstreaming and implementation of the IRA definition to dovetail with the Canadian adoption of the IRA definition in June of 2019 as part of Canada's federal anti-racism strategy. B'nai B'rith Canada's recommendation would bring the agreement between Canada's federal research funding agencies and post-secondary institutions in line with these commitments. The funding agreements utilized by the Canadian Institute of Health Research, the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada already contain the requirement that the institution receiving funding shall commit to develop and implement effective and equitable policies. It is a submission of B'nai B'rith Canada that a provision requiring consultation with the IRA definition and its illustrative examples is in the spirit of the existing agreements and with the guiding principles enumerated by the federal government in its anti-racism strategy. It is B'nai B'rith's further submission that such a provision will only serve an ameliorative purpose and ensure that Canada's interagency research funding is in line with its anti-racism strategy. Our second recommendation is that the federal government include funding in its 2025 budget to develop a 5-year program to enhance the IRA literacy of post-secondary students. The federal government, in its 2024 statement on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, indicated that it strongly supports and encourages the wide adoption and implementation of the IRA's non-legally binding working definition on anti-Semitism and illustrative examples. It is the submission of B'nai B'rith that efforts to ensure the wide application of the IRA definition and its illustrative examples requires the federal government to invest in ensuring Canada's future leaders are familiar with the nuances of the definition and how its examples can function as a tool and guide. B'nai B'rith, as a partner in the Department of Canadian Heritage Cease Mary funding, held a roundtable discussion with grassroots community leaders across the country. A recurring theme in the feedback was the need for greater understanding of the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. This mirrors comments B'nai B'rith has received from Jewish students across the country. The 5-year program could be administered by the Department of Canadian Heritage, could utilize the resources of our Special Envoy's handbook, and could be in the best interest of all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marceau, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je suis...
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm here on behalf of the CIJA, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs. I'll be frank, I'll be direct. In Canada, there is a crisis of anti-Semitism.
Recent rise of anti-Semitism terrifying, and he's right. Since October 7th, we've seen in Toronto a 93% rise in anti-Semitism crimes, the majority of which directed at the Jewish community. In Vancouver, reports of anti-Semitism rose by 62% in 2023, and 70% of those occurred after October 7th. In Ottawa, the number of hate-related crimes and incidents rose in 2023 by 20%. And in Ottawa, 1.4% of the population is Jewish, and the Jews were the target of 27% of those crimes and incidents. À Montréal, des coups de feu sont tirés sur des écoles juives.
In Montreal, shots were fired at Jewish schools. Molotov cocktails were thrown at a Montreal synagogue and other synagogues in Montreal Community Centre.
In Toronto, synagogues are picketed. Demonstrations take place at around Jewish neighborhoods for the sole purpose of intimidating its residents. Jewish-owned businesses are vandalized. Dans nos rues et dans nos campus,
in our streets, in our campuses, we hear the apology for terrorism and violence.
Very heart of Canadian democracy, on April 18th, we heard praises for October 7th. Quote, our resistance attacks are proof that we're almost free. Quote, October 7th is proof that we're almost free. Long live October 7th. Long live the resistance. Long live the Intifada. Long live every form of resistance. On Parliament Hill. Le 28 octobre dernier à Montréal.
On October 28 in Montreal, a controversial imam was given the mic, and in Arabic he declared, Allah, take care of these Zionist aggressors. Allah, deal with the enemies of the people of Gaza. Allah, identify them all and then exterminate them and spare none of them. Last week, we learned that he would not be charged.
Still in Montreal, yells of death to the Jews were heard in front of a Jewish school. It got so bad, the authorities were so passive that the only solution the community found was to go to the court to get injunctions to protect its institution. Let that sink in. In extraordinary course, those injunctions were granted and then extended and extended again. La situation sur les campus est très mauvaise.
The situation on university campuses is very bad. I won't repeat what you've heard from students here and last week and other panels.
On campus, that CJA's legal task force is supporting a student at Toronto Metropolitan University for fostering a poison anti-Semitic environment. We are suing TMU. TMU breached its contract with her, breached its duties of care to her, discriminated against her by failing to apply its own policies and procedure explicitly designed to protect students like her from anti-Semitic environment. We are putting universities on notice. There are and will be consequences for allowing anti-Semitism to take root on campus. Je pourrais vous parler de la situation dans les syndicats.
I could talk to you about the situation in unions and in our schools where we have to protect students. I don't have much time, so I'll just stick to my 8 recommendations.
Leaders must lead. That means that there are laws on the books to deal with the current situation, and those are not applied. The Justice Minister must give clear direction that laws that are already on the books be applied. Better training for courts, for police, and legal system is desperately needed. 2. Interdire le groupe Samidun.
2. Ban the Vancouver-based Semidun group for its direct and open links with terrorist groups. 3.
Legislation, also known as Bubbles legislation. There is a role for Ottawa to play here. 4. Lutter contre la...
4. Combat online harm, and we'll be debating this issue later.
Use the new anti-racism strategy and ensure no government funding goes to those promoting or platforming hate. In other words, no more Laith Marouf. 6. Interdire l'affichage des symboles.
6. Ban the display of symbols of terrorist organizations listed in Canadian law. 7.
As terrorist organization, you voted twice for this. Now it's time to do it. 8. Meilleure collection des données relatives.
Improve the collection and communication of hate crime data.
Chair, there's a crisis of anti-Semitism in this country. Words are not enough. We need action from you now.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Madame Kersner-Roberts, s'il vous plaît, for 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much, Madam Chair. My name is Jamie Kersner-Roberts. I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Simon Wiesenthal Centre based in Toronto. I feel very privileged to be here today, to have the opportunity to speak to this room of esteemed lawmakers and alongside some truly fantastic community advocates like Mr. Marceau, Mr. Robertson, and Special Envoy Lyons. So thank you for having me. Since October 7th, we have seen in our country an explosion of anti-Semitic hate, the likes of which we have not seen before. And at ground zero of this problem is our nation's universities, which have served as fertile grounds for the mobilization and recruitment of anti-Semitic hate groups, where students, faculty, and staff have been able to engage in the ugliest of hate speech and glorification of violence and terrorism against Jews without any fear whatsoever of consequence. Jewish students have increasingly found themselves targeted by abuse from their peers, singled out by their professors, subjected to harassment and discrimination, fearful that they will be discriminated against when it comes to grading. Students, in some cases, no longer feel safe physically, even crossing their own campuses, as they know they will have to pass by protests, encampments, and demonstrations, which are perpetrating hateful rhetoric. With respect to university administrations, we have seen, unfortunately, for the most part, that they have leaned in to political cowardice. We have seen an abject failure to hold accountable students, faculty, and staff who have perpetrated the most ugly of hatreds, who have glorified the most ugly of terrorist acts. We have seen an effect on our campuses, a failure to make the strategic decisions to ensure that campuses remain safe for Jewish students, a failure of university leadership. This is not the first time in the long history of Jewish people that we have seen universities become a breeding ground for the vilest anti-Semitism, a breeding ground for anti-Semitic hate groups. We have seen this all before in our long history, and we know where it leads. And this is why we know that the time for action is now. Simon Wiesenthal, he's the namesake of my organization, a Holocaust survivor who dedicated his life to justice. He said that freedom is not a gift from heaven. It is something we need to fight for every day. I thank you all for joining me here today as we work together to fight for freedom for all students on our campus, including Jewish students.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will now begin with our round of questioning, and we will start with Madame Landsman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for joining us today, all of you, and spending some time on this issue. Ms. Lyons, I'm just going to start by asking a couple of questions with some examples that I have here. The Canadian Foreign Service Institute either produces or shares with the Department of Foreign Affairs. What I see here is about 80 pages of training materials on anti-racism. And I start specifically with Global Affairs Canada. I know that you have a long esteemed career at Foreign Affairs, but 80 pages of anti-racism and all of the terms you can imagine and all of the sort of myths and facts that, frankly, in my opinion, in some cases invert history. But not a single mention of anti-Semitism in any of these documents. So, I mean, the question is do you really think that the government of Canada can combat anti-Semitism if it fails to mention it in its own anti-racism training documents?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were saying you had a couple of questions. Thank you very much for that question. Look, I think one of the things that has become obvious, particularly since October 7th, but frankly, I felt it was obvious before I took the job, that there's a lot of hard work to be done everywhere in our public service, federally, provincially, municipally, in businesses, in civil society, and most certainly in the universities, as we've heard this morning and you heard previously, in making sure that people understand anti-Semitism, that the right training is in place, that the IRA definition is better understood and implemented. And that is exactly what we're working on doing right now, Madam Chair, both in my office and within the Department of Heritage. Every one of the ministries, we are looking at the training that they have in place. We are working with the Canadian School on Public Service on ensuring that we have got those training programs. You're quite right to point it out that what we have now is sorely inadequate and has to change dramatically. And I believe, sincerely, that we have the commitment of all ministers to make that happen. And I can assure you we will if we don't.
So I'll talk about another piece. This is an Anti-Racism Let's Talk. This is a participant handbook, and I use this example because it's about 64 pages, and it's still offered by Treasury Board as a training manual. So this participant handbook, up until well after October 7th, had no mention of anti-Semitism. Now, it currently does have a mention of anti-Semitism. It's been put in after October 7th, but the definition of it is not an agreed one. It's a definition provided by a fringe organization that wouldn't even be invited to a committee like this one to speak about anti-Semitism. So there are changes being made, but they are the wrong changes. And in some cases, on things like the definition of racial trauma, which could be found on page 26 of this Anti-Racism Let's Talk, which is not anti-racism at all, it talks about the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and the definition just outright leaves out any mention of Jews, of Bosnians, of Armenians, of anybody who potentially experienced intergenerational trauma, something that the definition was probably based on when it came to fruition. So even the changes that are being made in government are the wrong changes. So again, I ask, how on earth does a committee like this make recommendations to the Government of Canada if the Government of Canada, in fact, has a problem within that is being corrected with bigger problems?
Thank you very much for that, for the question from the esteemed member. Again, I emphasize we have a lot of hard work to do, and we in no way have it right in terms of ensuring that the IRA definition, which the Canadian Parliament, all parties approved, and which is accepted by most of our provincial governments. That is why, and thank you for the question, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the handbook on the IRA definition that we hope to be releasing in June. That will be a clear explanation and interpretation of how the IRA definition needs to be used to underpin all of our anti-Semitism training. So you're quite correct to point out that even as some of our people try to make adjustments and improvements, we are still not where we need to be. Again, the hard work that needs to be done. I believe the commitment is there. I know that the new Anti-Racism Strategy 2.0 will be launched soon. We know that the government is looking at announcing their Combating Hate Action Plan. All of these provide an opportunity for an intensive campaign across not just the federal government, but provincial and municipal to actually get anti-Semitism well understood. What better time than now?
I want to just put on record when this committee is making recommendations that some of the Canadian anti-Semitism, Canadian anti-racism materials that are cited as additional reading come from workbooks. One of them is entitled "Dismantling Racism," and this is what it says. It does mention Jews, but only as a quick aside to say that Jews have opted to become white in order to benefit from white supremacy. Becoming white involves giving up parts of your original culture in order to get the advantages and privileges of belonging to a white group. This is the stuff that is cited by the Government of Canada in teaching people about racism. I cannot stress enough that this committee has no business making recommendations when the training itself in the Government of Canada is racist in itself.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Yes,
okay, I wasn't sure if your signal was for me or for the member. Thank you very much again for pointing this out. I think that there is no question that some of the material, much of the material, needs further reworking, and that is what my office is going to be doing, working with the public service right across our network. I think that what...
So, Ms. Lyons, why don't we leave the rest?
Okay, we'll let it go and come back to it. Thank you.
Mr. Mendocino, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for appearing and for the role that you are playing in combating anti-Semitism. We need your leadership now more than ever because anti-Semitism has never been more pervasive in Canada. Indeed, as we recently saw, B'nai B'rith published its annual audit reporting 5,791 anti-Semitic incidents committed in 2023, more than double the year prior, and those trends have only accelerated since October 7th. The fact is that Jewish hatred is running rampant in Canada, in government, in business, in labor, in universities, in schools, in places of worship, in our neighborhoods, everywhere. Last time, the committee heard from a number of very brave Jewish students, and their stories were distressing. In universities around the country, young Jews are being marginalized, threatened, and assaulted on campus, almost always without any recourse or enforcement of their own school's codes of conduct. Just last week, my colleague Anthony Housefather and I went to UBC, and we saw for ourselves the illegal encampment there. We saw banners calling explicitly for the eradication of Israel and violence against Jews. We toured Emily Carr and saw a Jewish student's artwork vandalized with Jewish hatred. We spoke with Jewish professors and union members who've experienced anti-Semitism and who've seen no action, leading some like Dr. Ted Rosenberg, who this committee will hear from shortly, to resign from their faculty. The truth is, universities in Canada are not safe for Jewish students. We are indeed in a crisis. Many universities have diversity, equity, and inclusive policies that make no reference whatsoever to anti-Semitism, which is shocking. And so my question is for the government's special envoy, Ms. Lyons. In my view, it's impossible to promote safe and inclusive campuses for everyone if DEI policies are completely silent on one of the most deeply entrenched forms of hatred and discrimination towards an identifiable group. Ms. Lyons, you spoke about your experiences with universities. Should universities update their DEI policies to make specific reference to anti-Semitism, and should they be engaging Jewish faculty, Jewish employees, and Jewish students in doing so?
Thank you very much. And again, I just want to reiterate how important it is for this committee to be examining this issue and making recommendations. And our office is very much looking forward to not just the recommendations, but again, research that you may have done in preparation for this committee that would help us to move forward in our work. Absolutely, there is no question that EDI is failing Jews in this country. EDI is failing anti-Semitism. It focuses on a very narrow description of marginalized or racialized or equity-seeking groups, and it does not include, it does not address anti-Semitism at all. And that has got to change. And we have seen this over and over again, which is why we're working with EDI heads, which is why when we talk about working with university administrations, we focus particularly on EDI units. But again, I would say, not just at universities. We also have to look at this in business environments and in our own government environments.
And I look forward to seeing that recommendation materialize in this committee's final report. Second, I want to branch out to the need for greater training of law enforcement within this country when it comes to the prosecution of anti-Semitic hate speech, because the trends are deeply alarming. We've heard and seen demonstrators say things like, all the Zionists are racists, all the Zionists are terrorists, long live October 7th, which was the single worst day of casualties to the Jewish people since the Holocaust during the Second World War. And the case of Adil Sharkoui is perhaps one of the most egregious offenses that I have seen, certainly since October 7th, when in the aftermath of October 7th, he took to the streets in Montreal, denounced Zionists, and called for the enemies of Gaza to be killed and to, quote, spare none of them. None of them. As a former prosecutor, I found the decision not to pursue criminal charges incomprehensible and deeply problematic. Zionists are an identifiable group on racial, religious, national, and/or ethnic grounds for the purposes of Section 318 and 319 of the Criminal Code. And so my question is to anyone who wants to take it. I see Monsieur Marceau in the room. I know also Ms. Kersner-Roberts is on the line. Do we need greater training of law enforcement, including police and prosecutors, to understand what anti-Semitic hate speech is, and to ensure that in the application of our existing laws that we are keeping our communities safe? Monsieur Marceau.
Merci, Monsieur le Député.
Well, thank you, sir.
We need better training. I mentioned this. Judges need to be better trained. Law enforcement need to be better trained. The entire system needs to be better trained. There is a lack of understanding of what anti-Semitism is and how pervasive it is. I am with you. I am flabbergasted by the decision not to prosecute the amount that you talked about. To me, I was blown away that he was not prosecuted. I was blown away that the organizer of that demonstration gave him the microphone, knowing who this person is. What we heard also on Parliament Hill on April the 18th, the heart of Canadian democracy is unacceptable. I understand that the OPS, the Ottawa Police Services, is still investigating. It shouldn't be that hard. We heard what they said.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's
Yes,
my time. Thank you.
time's up. Thank you very much. I will now go to Monsieur Fortin. La parole est à vous.
The floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Mr. Marceau, Ms. Lyons, Mr. Robinson, Ms. Kersner-Roberts, thank you very much for being here today. I think this is an important study, as Ms. Lyons pointed out right out of the gate. This is one of the most important topics that our committee will be focusing on this year, and we need to look at this very seriously. I listened to my colleagues speak, and ladies and gentlemen, I listened to your responses, and I too am very concerned about what occurred and the remarks that Amir Kadir made in the fall. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Mr. Shakawi, I should have said Mr. Shakawi last fall. And I have trouble fathoming the prosecutor's decision to not prosecute Mr. Shakawi. Now, I'm not going to call into question his decision. I am persuaded, like with all decisions that he made, he had good reason to make that decision. But as legislators in the federal government, I'm wondering, isn't there something wrong here? Isn't there some concrete action that we should be taking? And in that vein, my party recently introduced a bill to ban exceptions to religious hate speech under the criminal code. Now, currently, under Section 319, it's prohibited to foment hate or publicly incite hatred or voluntarily incite anti-Semitism. And I'll spare you reading out all of the sections, but it also states that it is a defence for those charges. And if the accused expressed an opinion in good faith on a religious issue or an opinion that is based on a religious text in which that individual believes, or tried to establish its wherewithal by way of argument. So in our opinion, that kind of exception should not be found in the criminal code. It's our belief that the criminal code is law that should apply to all Canadians, all Quebecers, and that the rules for living in Canada should be the same for all, regardless of one's religion, one's faith. And, for example, for argument's sake, there might be a religion that posits violent gestures or inciting hate, and in our humble opinion, that religion has no place either in Quebec or in Canada. So, Ms. Lyons, I'd like to hear from you first. In your opinion, should we do away with this kind of religious exception in the legislation which allows for what would otherwise be considered crimes on the sole basis of a religious text in which one believes?
Thank you very much for that question. I would have to say that I was very impressed with the recommendation that came forward from your party on this. And we have seen with this recent case in Quebec the implications of using a religious defense. Certainly, I think that it's something we've got to continue to examine, and I'm discussing it right now with the Department of Justice and with others. And at this stage of the game, I'm not going to, offer a final conclusion, but I am very interested in exploring this as an option because I think, frankly, we are seeing it used in this country and in other places as a defense that, frankly, does not stand the ground in these very difficult times. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Lyon.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon. Mr. Marceau, I'd like to hear your input on this issue. Well, thank you very much. religion is not and should not be a form of acceptable defence for a charge of provoking hatred, period. Now, if I held the position that I held 25 years ago, that is, if I still sat in Parliament and I was voting on this legislation, I would vote in favour of it. Thank you, Mr. Marcel. Mr. Robinson.
It's the submission of B'nai B'rith that what was at issue here is the scope in which the current law is being applied. The fact that this individual was given an exception to a speech that was being made outside of the church, that was not based in Scripture, that is the problem. It's the current law. We have it on the books, as Mr. Marceau alluded to during his testimony, and it needs to be applied as rigorously as possible to ensure the safety of all Canadians, including Jewish Canadians.
Merci, Monsieur Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. And Ms. Kisner-Roberts, last but not least, please. And I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much to the member for that question. Look, I agree with you. Every Canadian has to be subjected to the same laws and the same standards, and nobody's religion should excuse them from engaging in any kind of hate speech.
Il ne me reste que quelques secondes.
I only have a couple of seconds left, so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you again for being here today. And I do hope that we're able to make headway in this important fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred, regardless of what they're based on.
Merci beaucoup. Alors maintenant,
Now, Mr. McGregor.
last 6 minutes of the first round.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to echo my colleagues in thanking all of the witnesses for being here and helping inform this committee's study. I found in the opening statements from all of you a common thread on the need for education and training, and particularly with respect to Canada's post-secondary institutions. But I wanted to see if we could maybe turn the committee's attention a little bit on students before they get to post-secondary systems. So I had a pretty unique childhood in the 1980s in that I got to live in both Germany and Israel. So I lived in Germany from 1982 to 85, and some of my neighbors were former soldiers in the Wehrmacht. And I came to understand from a very young age of a country's collective guilt for its role in the Holocaust. And later on, I spent a year living in Israel, and of course, came to know a few Holocaust survivors. I visited the memorial at Yad Vashem, and so those two experiences had a profound impact on my life from a very young age, and helped me understand the Holocaust and the collective experiences of Jewish people around the world. I'm just wondering, Ms. Lyons, I know that education is under provincial jurisdiction, but do you think there is anything that this committee could recommend to the federal government on how it can partner with provincial governments to equip students before they reach post-secondary education institutions with that knowledge that is necessary so that they may be less susceptible to the hatred that has been so clearly outlined here?
Thank you so much for that very important question. Let me just mention a few things in the opening. We now have the majority of provinces, through their ministers of education, committing to mandatory Holocaust education in the schools, K to 12, to be implemented in the fall of 2025. So we have an enormous opportunity here, both with the attention that is in our environment, unfortunately, right now, around the issue of anti-Semitism. We have attention to the issue. We have a commitment from provincial ministers of education. In the recent budget, the federal government has committed an additional $5 million for the next 5 years, with $2 million ongoing for Holocaust education. We have excellent commitment and tools in front of us now to get the job done of really allowing our children from K to 12 the opportunity to learn about the Holocaust. But additionally, for this committee, we need to also ensure that it is being tied to a better understanding of modern-day anti-Semitism and how these are connected. And doing so in a way that we are also educating, I must admit, teachers and school boards about modern-day anti-Semitism. So I think from this committee's perspective, if we could look at making sure that as this education curriculum rolls out, it also applies, excuse me, to connecting to what hate environments do and the experience that we're facing right now in modern-day anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marceau, I'd like to turn to you for my next question. So my regular committee, one of my regular committees is the Public Safety Committee. And in 2022, I actually enjoyed a good working relationship with Mr. Mendicino when he was minister. One of our first reports was on the rise of ideologically motivated violent extremism. And I took note in your opening comments about the just how police and security services were not really acting on the laws that were already on the books. And the fear that many Jewish students are facing every time they go to a post-secondary institution. One of our recommendations in that report was with regards to the security infrastructure program. We asked that it be more effective, accessible, and responsive to community needs, included through expanded eligibility criteria and a simplified application process. I know that the 2024 budget does increase the funding for that program, but is there anything that you would like to see this committee recommend with respect to that program and how it may be tailored to address some of the things that you've outlined so clearly?
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Think about it. For Jews, to go to synagogue, it's like for many people going through the airport. Like there's somebody at the door, security. Imagine your school, imagine your church or your temple, or you must having to go through that level of security. And it is very expensive for members of the Jewish community when they belong to a synagogue to have to pay for this. So we're grateful that this program was put into place by the Conservative government. We are grateful that it has been bona fide under this current government. We are grateful that it seems to have support from every political party, but it can be better. And one of the things, and I'll close on this, Madam Chair, one of the things that I would suggest this committee looks at is the community security trusts. That's the British model that creates a synergy between the Jewish community and law enforcement to make sure that the security is dynamic and it's not simply helping business, helping institutions. And I'll close by this thing. We need training for prosecutor and not just police officers, because prosecutors, and Mr. Mendicino knows about this, have an important and crucial role to play in this in our justice system.
Thank you. Merci. Merci beaucoup. So our time is tight. What I could do is shorten the second round a little bit and probably go Mr. Moran's at 3 minutes, followed by 3 minutes, 1.5 and 1.5. So, Mr. Moran's, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mr. Marceau, you said earlier political leaders must lead. I would argue that the Prime Minister is leading, but in the wrong way. Since October 7th, they voted for a one-sided anti-Israel motion at the United Nations. A motion was passed in the House of Commons which punished Israel and rewarded Hamas, punished Israel by blocking arms sales and rewarding Hamas by reinstating funding for UNRWA, which I know you are currently suing the federal government over. They failed to unequivocally condemn the frivolous genocide convention claim launched in South Africa. If leadership comes from the top, this is exactly the wrong kind of leadership we need in the face of a B'nai B'rith report that shows that anti-Semitism since October 7th has spiked by 208%. Wouldn't you agree?
Thank you, Mr. Morans, for your question. Our disagreement with the government on some of its decisions regarding the current Hamas-Israel conflict are well known, and we're public about that. our disappointment and our condemnation for the vote at the UN was public, and when we had to disagree with the government, we disagree. We were talking. I don't remember. I apologize if you were there at the Holocaust Memorial Day service in January, and I was asked to speak. It was a big honor for me. And one of the things that I mentioned, and I tie it to Mr. McGregor's question regarding the Holocaust, Holocaust education is important. It is central. But I'm reminded of that amazing book that I invite you to read if you haven't. I'm sure you did. People Love Dead Jews. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to Holocaust education is important, and remembering what happened and knowing more about the education of what happened is important. But let me close this because
limited.
I understand.
Mr. Robertson,
but
what do you think of my question?
Please let me just.
It is my time, Mr. Marceau. Mr. Robertson, would you respond to my question?
Most certainly. B'nai B'rith has been frustrated by some of what has been transpiring in some of the messaging that we've heard from the federal government. We believe that the federal government has put in place some strong precedents in terms of their commitments, such as the 2024 commitment to preserving the Holocaust and to combating anti-Semitism. But now more than ever, we need actuation on this. As Mr. Marceau said in his remarks, words are small. We need action, and the Jewish community needs as strong a response from all members of Parliament. Fighting anti-Semitism cannot be a partisan issue. Thank you.
We will now go to 3 minutes for Madame de Brussen, s'il vous plaît.
My question, the first question I have is, for anyone who can answer, are any universities in North America, be it Canada or the United States, getting it right? Like, are there examples that we should be looking at with universities that have good DEI policies? Mr. Robertson?
I'm happy to answer that question. There are universities in the United States who have shown great leadership by adopting the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. I think the better example to look at, though, is actually the United Kingdom, where the vast majority of educational institutions in the United Kingdom, including world-leading institutions like Oxford, Cambridge, and Durham, have all adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. We need Canadian universities to follow the lead of these American and UK, as well as German institutions, and adopt the IRA definition.
Okay, I don't have much time, so I'm going to ask anyone, if you have examples, can you submit it to us in writing so that we have those as examples? Because I also wanted to go on to, in this budget, we have committed to providing support to police colleges to increase training on handling hate crimes. Do any of you have suggestions as to what you would like to see in that training to make sure anti-Semitism is included?
I'll mention just a few and pass to my colleagues. First of all, we really appreciate all of the good support in the budget. It's excellent. It really was wind in our sails, particularly with regard to law enforcement, money for training, the work that CRRF is doing in terms of delivering training, but it has got to be specific to anti-Semitism, and it has got to incorporate the IRA definition. That is critical, and this committee should make that as one of its recommendations. Please, it's critical that we have that. The money, to be well spent, must incorporate the IRA definition and training. Secondly, we have prosecutors, as important an issue as it is, we have prosecutors, special prosecutors for auto theft. We have no special prosecutors for anti-Semitism or a focus on hate crimes. I think this is a recommendation, although I know it's provincial jurisdiction, but it is necessary. I'll leave those two with you.
If I can go to the next ones, it's going to be the same question, but I am also, just because I'm short on time, asking if anyone has suggestions. Again, put it in writing. There was also budget funding for this, starting this year, to the Department of Justice for specialized training to Crown prosecutors to raise awareness in the judiciary about the unique dynamics of hate crime. So as well, if there are any suggestions on that, I do have half a minute, so Monsieur Marceau.
So in terms of police, one of the recommendations, a lot of police forces would say, well, we don't really have the resources or the expertise to train our people well. I think there's a role to play for the federal government to basically have a turnkey program for prosecutors and for police forces to say, you know what, police force for this city, you don't have to do it. We're going to come in, we're going to train you, we're going to do it. It's a free service for you. And in that way, you also ensure that there's consistency across the country.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Monsieur Fortin, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors,
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have 90 seconds, so I'll try and be as quick as possible. There's a question that I've been mulling over. We know that currently there's a war on the Gaza Strip. We know that international opinion, and I won't delve into a critique on this, but international opinion is not unanimous in terms of who to support. Now, today, we're focusing on the issue of anti-Semitism